Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to part 10 to our Godot Action RPG series. In the last video, we ended up adding our attack animation with our attack state, but we still don't have anything to actually attack, so we're going to be adding that in this video. Now, we won't be getting into the actual hurt boxes and hit boxes for those attacks yet. That will be in the next video, but we're going to add a grass scene and a death effect for that grass in this video, and we'll also be learning a little bit about signals and what signals can be used for, which they're very powerful. So let's start by organizing our scene here a little bit. I want to put all of our bushes into their own little group over here in our scene tree so that when we start adding grass, we can have bushes and grass all kind of organized. So to do that, we can add a new child node here, and we can add a node 2D, and we can call this bushes, and we can select our bushes. I'm going to select the top one, hold shift, select the next one, click and drag them and drop them into our bushes folder here, right? The problem that comes up when we do that is that if we run our game, our Y sorting no longer works. Why is that? Well, it's actually sorting these bushes based on the position of this bushes node right here. And that doesn't work because they each need to be sorted on their own position. So the solution to this is to change this. You can right click on the node, do change type, to its own Y-sort node. So you can have a Y-sort node inside of another Y-sort node. And then apparently it's smart enough, Godot is smart enough to be able to know, oh, okay, they want to group these together, but they want to be able to have Y-sorting on each individual one still. So that works quite nicely for doing that. The other thing I want to do real quick is inside of our player, a lot of you have been asking, and this is a really good question, so I appreciate it. A lot of you have been asking about the difference between the physics process and the process function. So the main difference between these two, and you can actually look it up in the documentation, right? We've got these functions in the documentation, and you can learn about them. You can see here in our process, called during the process step of the main loop, processing happens at every frame as fast as possible. So this happens, the process happens as fast as it possibly can. And so the delta time for that is not constant, it's different. And so this is different from the physics process, because if you look up physics process, if you look up the physics process, this is called during the physics process of the main loop process. Physics process means that the frame rate is synced to the physics. That means this function, this callback function, waits until the physics of the game have already been processed. And so delta for this should be constant. It shouldn't change. And the main idea behind that, so why is that important, right? Why would they do that? Why would they have a physics process or a process? Well, the main reason is because if you need to access any variables that are manipulated by the physics engine, so for example, the position of the player, if we needed access to the player's position, or something else that's manipulated by the physics, we would need to do that inside of the physics process in order to get accurate data. If we did it in the process, we might actually be getting the position of the player on the previous frame because the physics hasn't been updated yet. So that's the reason why we have the physics process or the process. So in this case, since none of our code actually accesses the player's position or any physics variables, we have our own velocity and stuff like that, speed and acceleration, but these aren't actual variables related to the kinematic body. These are variables that we have created. We're not actually accessing any of the kinematic body physics-based variables. And so because of that, we don't need to use the physics process. We can just use the process. And from what I'm told, this actually helps with jitter and stuff as well. It helps the game to run smoother. So if you can, stick it in the process event, and then you can stick it in the physics if you actually need to get access to the player's position or something like that. Then that is going to be when you'll want to use the physics process. Okay, so there's just a little bit of cleanup in our project that I wanted to do. Now let's actually create our grass scene, create a new scene, do a new 2D scene, we'll call this grass, and we'll save this scene, Control S, inside of our world, save, kind of by our bush. We'll add a new sprite node to this, so sprite node right here, and we can drag in our grass texture. We'll set the offset, we don't want this to be centered, and we'll set our offset to -8 by -8. We can save, and now we can place some of this grass inside of our world. And we'll click on our Y sort scene here, and we'll create a new child node. We'll do another Y sort, and we'll call this grass. And then if we have that selected, we can then grab our grass scene from down here and place it around in the room. Oops. Let's undo that. Just like this. Put some over here. And another way to do this is you can actually duplicate it around. So I can select this one, duplicate it, and then drag this around. You just use Control D to duplicate it, and that can be a little bit faster than manually placing all of these. So there we go. We'll call that good for now, and save and run our game. Now we've got some grass. And it has some Y sorting, so you can see we can actually go behind some of those. For the most part, we just kind of run on top. Okay, and now now that we've got those organized nicely, you can actually hide or show them all at once. We'll come into our grass scene here. We'll add a script to it, and that should save under world_grass.gd, and we'll uncomment this process function. You can use Control K to uncomment it. And then we can say if input.isAction just pressed attack queue free. So what does the queue free function do? Well, it adds this node to a queue of nodes that should be freed, or basically removed from memory, destroyed from the game. And it does that. It doesn't remove them right away, just in case there's other things that need to access them on this frame. So it usually waits till the very end of the frame to remove those from the game. It's different from the free function, which will remove it right away. But queue free is generally what you're going to want to use. So now when we run the game and we press this, all of our grass gets destroyed. So we've got the most OP attack in the game right now. But we're going to want to set up an effect for when the grass is destroyed. So let's create a new scene here. We're going to do a 2D scene. We'll call this grass effect. And this time, we'll save this. Save this scene, Control S. But let's come back into... If you can press this little button up here to go back, we're going to come into our effects folder and save it inside of effects. Now we'll add a new sprite to this, but we're going to use an animated sprite for this. Now we didn't use an animated sprite for our player because we wanted to be able to use the blend space 2D and like the animation tree and stuff like that. So because of that, we didn't use the animated sprite, but you can use animated sprites, and I'm using it here because this is a lot simpler of an animation. It doesn't require lots of different things. It's just one little animation, and that's where animated sprite shines. So we can create new frames over here, do new sprite frames, and click on that, and that will open up this little window. This is an animation that we've created. We'll just call this animate, I guess, because it's just going to be the grass kind of falling apart in the air, the leaves kind of fluttering. And we'll set our frames per second to 15 here. Now we need to add an animation. We need to add animation frames to this animation right here. So we can click on this because ours is from a sprite sheet. And then we come into effects and we select our grass effect.png, and that will open up this window. This, you can't zoom in here, so this is a little bit rough still. It's a slightly newer feature to Godot. I don't have a lot of experience with it yet. But right here, these numbers right here represent how many frames there are. So you can see vertically, we actually only have one frame vertically, right? There's only one row here. And so for this animation, and so we want to set this down to 1. And horizontally, it's hard to tell because of the kind of animation that we have here, but I know that this animation actually has 5 frames horizontally. So now you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, in order to continue, we need to select these frames. Now you can manually select them just in case, you know, you had a giant sprite sheet and you only wanted some of the frames, you didn't want all of them, you can manually select them. But in our case, we can just select them all using this button up here and do add 5 frames. Now we have each of these frames inside of our animation. And we can turn on playing here, and this animation will play, and we've got loop set to true, so it plays over and over and over and over again. We're going to turn off loop, we're going to turn off centered, and we'll turn off playing for now. And then we'll set our offset to -8 and -8, just like the grass that we have, the grass scene that we have over here. So now we've got this sprite animation set up on this animated sprite, but we need to actually play it. So let's come into our grass effect scene over here. We'll add a script that should be added under effects, grass effect. And we'll just call this, well, actually, instead of calling it grass effect, let's just call it effect for now. Well, we'll leave it grass effect. We'll probably end up changing that later. So create. And then inside of here, we're going to get access to our animated sprite. So var onReady var, actually, animated sprite equals animated sprite. Now what can we do with this animated sprite? Well, let's look it up in the documentation. Animated sprite. What kind of functions do we have? We have play with an animation. We have stop, and we have if is playing. So those are kind of the functions we can do. We've got these different properties we can manipulate, but we don't really need to worry about those actually. So all we're going to do is inside of our grass effect in the ready function, we'll call animated sprite.play animate. And then we can run the game. Well, actually, we don't want to run the game. We want to run this specific scene right here to make sure that this is working. We can do that by pressing this little button right here or hitting F6. And I couldn't tell if it actually played. Animated sprite play. We didn't get any error messages. Let's do, I want to be able to test this. So we'll do a process function. We'll say if input.is action just pressed attack. And then we'll copy this line right here and paste it right here. And run this scene. And now if we press the space key, it should animate, but we're not seeing it animate. So something is wrong here. Maybe we have to have playing set to true. Let's turn on playing again. Try this one more time. We're still not getting it actually playing. So I'm guessing the problem is since we're not on loop here, it actually is playing it whenever we do that, but it's not starting on the last frame or on the first frame. It's starting on the last frame. That's my suspicion here. So let's see if our play function takes some sort of properties. So we've got backwards. We pass in the string here. So it has a frame that it is set to. The default is set to 0, but we might need to reset that frame. So let's try doing that real quick. Animated sprite.frame equals 0. So we'll see how this goes. Let's see how this goes. And there we go. Now it's working properly. So essentially it was playing, but it was starting on the very last frame. So what we want to do here is set our frame equal to 0 right in here. We can get rid of that code now. We don't need it. So once this is created, it will start on frame 0, and then it will animate our sprite. And then what? Well, we want to get rid of it, right? So it animated there. It's hard to see, but it did animate there. Well, we want to get rid of it, but we don't want to get rid of it until the animation is finished, till the animation is over. And this is where signals come in. So on our animated sprite node here, if you click on it, instead of having inspector, come over to node, and you should see these two tabs called signals and groups. We're not going to worry about groups right now, but we do want to worry about signals. And you can see under the animated sprite, we have an animation finished and a frame changed signal. So these signals, they're basically signals that they're kind of like messages that get sent out, like a text message or something that gets sent out whenever something happens. It says, hey, this thing happened, like your friend has a baby or whatever. He sends out a message to everyone and says, hey, I just had a baby, right? That's kind of what it's like. And so we've got animation finished here. This signal is the one that we're concerned with, because once this animation is over, we actually want to destroy our grass effect. So we're going to double click on this animation finished signal, and it will open up this window, and it says connect a signal to a method. So this is a little bit scary looking. Signals can be scary, but basically whenever a signal fires, you want to connect that signal to some sort of function or method, so that when that signal happens, when the text gets sent out essentially, we do something, right? What do we want to do? Well, we want to send a text back and say congratulations to our friend, for having a baby. So in this case though, what we want to do is call this function right here. This is the function we're going to be creating, and this is the function that will be called whenever our animation finish signal gets sent. So we'll do connect, and you can see it's opened up our grassEffect.gd script, and it's added this function. So now we can set up what it's going to do, and we're going to do queue free. So when this animation finishes, this grass effect will destroy itself. And you can see now there's this little icon in the editor for the signal that we connected. And if we click on signals here, we can see that it's been connected. We get this information and the function it's been connected to. And we can double click on that and it will bring us to that location in the code editor here. And we can also see that it's been connected here. We can see that this is a signal. We can click on that and get information that the source is the animated sprite node. The signal that this is connected to is the animation finished. And the target node that it's connected inside of is the grass effect right here. So let's run this scene again, see if this works. And yep, at the end, it actually gets destroyed. So one more thing we're going to learn about here is actually instancing nodes in code, or instancing scenes in code, because we know how to instance a scene inside of the editor here, right? We've done it before. We clicked on the grass, drag, you drop it in the editor. Well, how do you create the effect, right? Our grass effect inside of the game while the game is running. because we want to create it when our grass dies. So let's come into our grass script here, and we're going to create our grass effect scene right here inside of this grass.gd script once the grass is destroyed, right here once it's been attacked. So first we need to create a variable, and we'll call this grass effect. And I'm using a lowercase g here. I'm using camel case here, basically, a lowercase g here. And that's because generally with my scenes, I name them with an uppercase here. So this is an instance of a scene, so I'm naming it lowercase here. Well, actually, we're going to load the scene first. So let's do uppercase. Ironically, grass effect equals load. And then we need to pass in a path for the scene that we're going to be loading. And well, we want to load our grass effect. So that's going to be under effects, grass effect.tscn. And it'll be under this path right here. Okay, well, that's kind of a pain to type out, but in Godot, you can actually come into your file system, go into here, find the grass effect scene, grass effect.tscn, drag and drop it right here. And that gives you the exact path to that scene. Okay, so once we've loaded this scene and stored it inside of this variable, we now need to create an instance of it. So we can say var grass effect equals grass effect dot instance. Okay, now this is a little confusing because we've got uppercase grass effect here, lowercase grass effect here. Why? Well, this is the actual scene right here. This is called a packed scene. So it's a scene. It's not actually a node. But this right here, this variable is going to have an instance of that scene, which will actually just be a node, right? So it will be its own node, where this is a packed scene. It's a different kind of data. So once we instance that scene and store it inside of grass effect, well then, we actually need to put that grass effect inside of the room, like inside of this scene, right? So think about it this way. When we bring in our grass effect like this and drop it in, this node the scene gets instanced and then dropped inside of here as an instance of that scene. And we know it's instance because you can make multiple of them, right? But it has to be added as a child of some other node in the scene. It has to be added as a child. So we have to tell it to do that in code. If we come back in here, we can say, we could add it as a child of our grass that we're on right now, but we don't want to do that because the grass is about to get freed. So then it would destroy our effect. We want to add it to the root world node, or maybe our Y sort node. And that kind of depends on you, which one you want to add it to. But for me, I'm just going to add it to the root world node. So how do we get access to the root world node inside of our script? We can say var main equals get tree dot current scene. So this gets the current root main scene of our scene tree. Okay, and that's a little bit scary. It's a little bit hard to understand, but we can actually see this in action. So if you run Godot, okay, and then you come over here, you can see you have a local scene, which is the scene in the editor, but you also have a remote scene. Now this is the actual scene that the game is currently running. This is what the game actually looks like over here. You can see we have our world scene. We've got our background, dirt path, our Y sort. It's all this stuff. And if you click on these, like if we click on player and go to the inspector, we can actually see information about our player in real time. All of this stuff in real time this isn't the scene that we made inside of our editor. This is the scene that's actually running in the game right here. So if we actually move our player over here, we can see our player's position updating down here in the corner in real time. So we can see exactly what's happening inside of the game. So this right here is called our scene tree. So when we do get tree, it's getting this right here. And when we say current scene, so get tree dot current scene, it's actually getting the very first scene that it has right here, this world scene. And so that gets us access to world. So we can call this main, or we can call it world, whatever you want to do. Probably for consistency, I want to call it world here. So let's stop running the game. And that brings us back to here. And then we can say world.add child. And the child that we want to add is our grass effect. Now make sure this is a lowercase g, because this is the instance of our grass effect scene. You can't actually add a grass effect scene to the world node. It has to be an instance of it. Okay? And once we've done that, we can actually run the game and test this. So let's run the game and test it. Okay, so they all got destroyed here, and we got a grass effect, but maybe you guys saw it, maybe you didn't. It was actually up here in the top left-hand corner. Well, that's because when the effect gets added to the world, it's being added at position 0, 0. So we also need to set the position. We need to tell it where in the world this grass effect should be. And we'll do that by saying grass effect dot position dot global position equals global position. Now this global position is the global position of our grass. So we're setting the grass effect global position to the global position of the grass. Now when we run the game and we swing our sword, we get the grass effect at the position of all of the different grasses. And that's the effect we want. That's the effect we want. So learning how to instance scenes inside of code is very important if you want to do anything inside of Godot. Like if you want to have a gun that shoots, or if you want to, whatever it is, you're going to need to learn to instance scenes inside of code. And this is how you do it. You load the scene. This is step 1, stored in a variable. You instance that scene. This is step 2, store that in its own variable. You add that scene. Well, this is getting access to the world, but you add that scene as a child of whatever node you want to add it to. In our case, we wanted to add it to world, so we had to get access to the world first. And then you set its position generally. So those are the steps in order to add it to the world. And so I hope you learned something in this video. This is going to be it for this video. We did quite a bit. We learned some new things, and we're ready for our hurt boxes and hit boxes video, where we can set up actually attacking individual pieces of grass instead of just destroying them all at once with our overpowered move. So this video was made possible by my Kickstarter backers for the 1-Bit Godot course. I'll put information about that in the description and at the end of this video. Thank you all so much for your support. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you all later.